engineers never were educated or trained how to play nice with others. In other words, you want to see a cat fight, you have a project where in the same room on the same project are a civil, mechanical, electrical, industrial engineer talking about a problem. They spend most of their time defending themselves and never asking the other person to tell them more about what the problem is they see. And as a result, as I mentioned earlier, at least 60%, sometimes more, depending on the company, of their projects don't meet their goals, either scope, schedule, or budget.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the 21st Century Engineer. Once again, the conversations we're having here are related to making you a better professional, regardless of what area you work in a professional sense relative to civil infrastructure. Our goal in putting this podcast together is to be thought-provoking and to facilitate your ability to be the best version of the professional that you want to be in whatever context that represents. So we're providing multiple facets, multiple areas, multiple conversations with multiple people. And so you get me talking less and my guests talking more. Speaking of guests, we're honored today to have Dr. William Hayden Jr. with us today, Bill. We discovered in setting the podcast up that Bill and I actually served on a committee at ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, back some 25 years ago. The committee was devoted to facilitating the entry of underrepresented groups into the civil engineering workplace. And that work is still ongoing in many, many facets. We may talk about that a little bit as we get towards the end of the podcast. But we want to focus on the environment, the AEC environment, as we move forward. So with that, Bill, thank you for being with me today, with us today, taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us and sharing your perspectives on what it is. If you will, kind of give our guests, our visitors, an opportunity to understand where you're coming from, what you've experienced, and the background for your perspectives.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you and Chad as well for helping me bring up to date with this technology.
Yeah.
Where I would start is back around 1980 or so. Dr. Deming did a show on NBC, If Japan Can, Why Can't We?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of years later, President Reagan, in order to help the big three automakers, instituted an import tax. So you wouldn't buy a Japanese or a German car till American cars improved. And he told them it would only last for a few years. Following that time is companies in the AEC business found out that they were told that in order to even be considered to bid on proposals for the federal government and some state governments, they had to submit a quality plan, a quality management, quality assurance plan for the project. The major companies, of course, filled with themselves, said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, fine, in the next 17 to 18 months, we're going to shut the gate. If you don't submit such a plan, you won't even be reviewed for an award. So they got religion. I then accepted a position to become a director of quality for a major firm. And then in a year or so, went into private practice. I traveled across the planet into AEC firms across Canada, the United States, Mexico, Porto, Budapest, Tokyo, Seoul, Manila, and even in Riyadh. And what I found was when you step back from their customs and cultures and language and just look at the work they do and how they do it, they shared two things. One is 60% of their projects would fail to meet project requirements. And technical issues were rarely the driving force. They may show up later, but they weren't the reason. And so that put me on this mission to shed the information that Deming provided and make it known and help AEC firms put their show in order.
And of course, Bill, that translated into the educational process for engineers, particularly, and you ended up with a whole new set of accreditation criteria for engineering programs rolling out shortly after your effort. What we in the marketplace refer to as the AEC, the ABET 2000, and that was a Deming-based quality, a QAC, quality control and assurance program to make sure that people that were being educated met certain standards. Now that has kind of gone by the wayside for a variety of reasons, but it's still the fundamental philosophy of making sure that people are prepared, making sure in the educational environment, making sure people are prepared, making sure that they're meeting the expectations of their employers. Of course, in civil infrastructure, as you know eminently, the idea is that in civil infrastructure, you never do the same project twice. And a lot of Deming's work was geared around manufacturing. In fact, the Japanese took Deming's work and beat us over the head with it. And Deming, hence, as you mentioned, came out in 1980 and issued the cry or the challenge that we could be doing this too. We're just chosen not to. Big Blue or whomever, well, not Big Blue, not IBM, but the companies felt like they knew how to do everything right and weren't willing to learn. And the dinosaurs, which we now have in our industry, felt like, well, what we did 50 years ago was fine, so we're going to continue to do it, as opposed to what we did 50 years ago is what we did 50 years ago. This is now the 21st century. Let's move forward. And that's part of the reason I wanted you to come in, because you've got that perspective of a 21st century engineer. You've got that perspective of what we need to be doing. So I appreciate you spending the time being here and continue the impact that you have on the profession.
Yes, and I appreciate the opportunity. As a matter of fact, less than a year ago, I joined the American Society for Engineering Educators, and then they have a group, the American Engineer Educators for Management, and then they started one for leadership. And what I learned when I leaned on them, and I had to lean on them to get the information, is that the number of members of their committee looking at leadership development in the educational programs for our young engineers coming up is less than 10% of the members of their group are in practice. In other words, it's educator engineers meeting with other educator engineers, shaping their thoughts and programs, and in my judgment, not enough what I would call collaboration and cooperation and communication with the customers of their programs. The customers would be the firms that hire their graduate students.
Understood. And I'm a life member of ASEE. And yes, it's just one of the many environments where you end up finding yourself talking in an echo chamber. You've got academicians talking to academicians about what academicians should be doing to prepare people for practice when the academicians have never practiced a day in their lives. And I say that as somebody who, again, was an academician, but a third of my time mentally, I guess, was academician. A third was service, and a third was my consulting. So I've practiced. I've been on the academic side. I've been all over the map, as it were, in terms of the things that I've done, and I completely understand what you're saying. And I'm surprised it's even 10%. Because of the nature of what it is ASEE does. Nothing against the organization, but in terms of who they attract and what they attract, it's really more a matter of the industry taking the attitude that has been longstanding through the last century of, we let universities produce the product we're going to hire, and we expect it to be whatever it is we need, and put little energy in ensuring that that's the case. So I applaud you for stepping up and getting involved.
Yeah, as a result, one of the things I learned, and you realize I went into this with a student-like mentality. as you pointed out, most of the work that started with Deming and quality in his country was on your manufacturing side. But I
Right.
found that I was able to read their literature and textbooks and follow their experts and translate it into service-oriented applications in our profession. And one of the things that became clear was my characterization is engineers never were educated or trained how to play nice with others. In other words, you want to see a cat fight, you have a project where in the same room on the same project are a civil, mechanical, electrical, industrial engineer talking about a problem. They spend most of their time defending themselves and never asking the other person to tell them more about what the problem is they see. And as a result, as I mentioned earlier, at least 60%, sometimes more, depending on the company, of their projects don't meet their goals, either scope, schedule, or budget.
Sure. Yeah, it's not about correcting the problem. It's about defending what they put out there. It's not
Yeah,
my fault it's wrong. It's somebody else's fault, or it's
yeah,
not wrong.
it's as Deming was fond of saying, it's not the people. I may have talked about the people, but it's not the people. It's the system.
Yeah.
And right now we have a silo mentality around disciplines in our profession, around university and university programs by school, and arm's length from the clients or customers of the system, which would be those firms in public sector and private sector who need engineers to help them with their infrastructure programs.
Yeah.
And until the silos open up some windows so people can see each other and start listening to each other, I'm not looking forward to much improvement in the system.
Yeah. I agree. And in that regard, the I'm going to call it the professional side as opposed to the academic side. Though it's an academic, I'm also a professional, but not all are. But on the professional side, on the consulting side, on the industrial side, I'll simply say in simple, clear terms, you're clueless. You have no idea of the business model universities operate under today. So you got to come up to speed on what it is that operates universities. And I'm going to put myself out on a limb here and quickly say, if you think the purpose of a university is to educate the next generation of engineers, you wrong. And you need to find out why you wrong and how it got this far off the rails. That's not what engineering education is about. I guarantee. So, what it said, it is what it is. Let's talk about that. We've produced these individuals that have come out with engineering degrees, whatever they may be, and want to move into the AEC professional workplace. Uh, what's your perspective on what they should be expecting to see? Is it a positive environment that's going to be embracing and nurturing, or is it a hostile environment where they need to be armed and ready to defend themselves, or
Yeah,
somewhere in between?
yeah. I would generalize it this way, Dennis, is if we step back from it and you look at the behaviors of the men and the very few rare women who sit in the C suites, it's all directly related to them and their behaviors, not what they write, not the speeches they give, not the end of the year Christmas party where they say, I love you guys, but in fact, how they behave. What is the level of what we like to call these days psychological safety? In other words, on a project group sitting around the table trying to resolve a problem in your company, figuratively, in your company, how safe is it to disagree with the project manager or a discipline leader or an executive by simply stating your opinion? How safe is your job after doing that?
Hmm.
And until the level of psychological safety improves, I'm not expecting much significant change.
Understand and agree, and in fact, if anything, the workplace environment has kind of moved. At least some workplace environments have moved in the other direction, where the what otherwise was thought to be safe, free speech has now become something you have to be more guarded about, thinking about it in a way that doesn't contradict the powers that be, as it were. Uh, Understanding corporate policy, protocols, procedures, process is obviously something one has to learn. Any suggestions on how a young professional that's moving into, or maybe wants to move up in, should be going about a process of getting a handle on that understanding of the corporate environment?
Um, I can tell you where they conclude once they learn their engineering work, their ability to be effective and efficient on projects and the like. What they look for in the organization is the level of recognition, challenge, and opportunity that's offered to them. And what I've learned happens is your very best and brightest, they don't warn you or tell you, they're out the door to their next job. And I recall a woman engineer telling me she went to lunch with her former manager. And when she told the former manager what she felt was missing in the employment, let's say the culture of that company, he said, "Oh my goodness, why didn't you tell me? I would have." And she said to him, "Too late. It's too late. I couldn't put my career any further at risk until I was in a company that appreciated me. It had nothing to do with money or an increase in salary. It had everything to do with knowing I was listened to, not necessarily agreed with, but at least listened to, and that it was safe to express my opinion." And that's a characteristic I find with most of the people. Is it? I've learned, Dennis, if I could, is when I work with companies, which is quite rare these days, but what I did was I met first with people in their organization that were under the age of 38 or 39, men and women, and I met with them separately, and that prepared me to meet with everyone else in the company later. When I created an environment, the proverbial circular table for everyone to sit at in that age group, men and women under 40, under 38, I found a lot of openness and clarity in what was happening and not happening that was required for them not only to make the company successful, but themselves. And I found that once you started looking at men and the very few women at the top over 50 or 55 and above, their ability to listen without judgment was seriously constrained.
Yeah, I've found the same. Uh, it's again the nature of the environment. In order to succeed uh, and move into the upper management, you're expected to basically toe the line, support the vision, and in that regard, anything that rocks the boat is to be isolated or insulated from the conversation. And in middle
Yeah.
management and below, certainly looking for new solutions, new options, new alternatives. And it's really difficult, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast, to motivate those individuals in that position, again, middle management and down in the professional organizations, to say, hey, how do I have impact? How do I make change? And the answer is, you have to be, first off, go back to what you said, you have to have a safe environment. You have to have an environment that's willing to let you express yourself without with impunity. And if
Yes.
you find yourself uh, threatened in some way, my simple answer is, to some of the people I've actually done mentoring with, is leave. You don't have to put up with this. The
Yeah.
environment,
Yes.
this is an environment that is self imploding, and you don't need to be there when the walls collapse.
Yeah. Let me
And
share a story I
sure.
with Dr. Deming. Um, I wasn't aware of Deming, although I referenced his television show in 1980, until after I received the appointment in this engineering company to be their director of quality. And the rest of his life, he died, I think, at 96 or 97. I got to see him three times. Twice, once passing in a hotel, he grunted at me. And then once at an airport, he grunted again with his faithful woman, I forget her name. She was always with him, his secretary, professional. But then one time in a hotel in Washington, D.C., it was for a celebration of him and his work. It was an evening dinner meeting. there must have been at this point, it was 1986, 87 or so. So he had reached a lot of public acclaim in the United States. The place was filled with C-suite top executives, all dressed to the nines, all there to celebrate him. So Dr. Deming goes up on the podium. This is the very first time I saw him. He's in his old brown suit. He opens up a file folder of the old yellow pages, the lined yellow pages we all used to use, and he looks out at this group. And what he said was, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're not doing your job." And right then and there, that shaped my practice for the rest of my career, speaking truth to power.
Understand. And obviously, he had obtained a position where he felt comfortable doing that in that environment. And I'm sure that most of the people, probably half the people, never heard another word he said. And the other half probably heard it and applied enough salt that it fermented and disappeared.
Well, this was constant in his practice. I remember a story. I just forget the company. It was one of the big top 10 or top 20 organizations in our country financially, and they called him in to a board of directors meeting, and he came in and sat there. And after the first 5 minutes in introductions, the president of the company got up and walked out. And before he could get to the door, Deming stood up and grabbed his folder and papers. And they said, "Where are you going?" He said, "If he's not sitting here, he doesn't understand. I'm not staying."
There you go. Yeah. I mean, why should one person be able to get up and leave? I might as well leave too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the message is we do and have done a great job providing technical insights and expertise to our engineers in the disciplines and developing all types of tools and techniques to help them do their work. What we haven't done and we haven't given at least equal, if not more attention to, is again the skills and knowledge and education, how to play nice with others, making your first response, "Tell me more, please," rather than becoming immediately defensive. This was the topic of my dissertation, which I've mentioned before was late in life, based on my learning from consulting work with these companies around the planet, was conflict. And the general theme of my dissertation was, why is conflict running rampant in our firms?
Okay. And your answer was?
It was pretty much what I've gone over so far.
Okay.
Is There's nothing new to add. This is what I came out of the research. Matter of fact, I remember what you'll appreciate this, given your career in academia. One of the first questions I got in my notes to begin the draft for the dissertation was a question to me: Who else is interested in this topic? Then it never occurred to me. Why would I ask anyone else, for God's sakes? I'm a civil engineer. I know everything.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
did the research, and I had to stop after 67 or 68 professionals in their papers that gave me detailed dimensions to the concept of what I was looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the knowledge is there, the information is there, but within our academic engineering programs, they've walled up their openness to these disciplines outside of the normal chain of engineering, let's say, capabilities.
And that's the environment they work in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
It is what it is. And it's,
Let me be clear. It
there's,
also, this is the third time I wanted to be clear, is I worked for 23 years as adjunct faculty in a school of management, which obviously is not about engineering. Same characteristics.
oh yeah. Well, let's recognize that if you stay in the profession long enough, you're going to be a manager, either at the project level or at an advanced level beyond that. So, management skills, which generally aren't taught as part of an undergraduate education, are something one has to pick up. And what I've said and what I say to the audience today is the reason they're here, hopefully, is that they understand that their career, their profession, their job, whatever, however you want to frame this, is their responsibility. You don't sit back and wait for your employer to give you what you need to succeed. You need to go ask for it. And if they can't provide it, you need to go find other ways of getting it,
And
because
another skill set that they can
that's their job. That's their
I've
profession.
I've sent many people with successful feedback. Is, as I mentioned before, at least 60%, if not many more, of the engineers tend to come from the Myers-Briggs introvert side. Unlike myself, who shoot my mouth off every chance I get, they actually listen. And a place to go to learn to speak and express yourself is Toastmasters. So while your university may not offer it, I send everybody and anybody I can in our profession, go to your local Toastmasters. The room is filled with women and men just like you, struggling to stand up and express their thoughts without fear of criticism.
Yeah. Well, in fact, one of the podcasts I did here just recently talked about the need for people to stand up and make presentations. To
Yes,
make, I mean, whether it be a 10-minute or an hour long, that's not relevant. It's knowing what's involved in having impactful presentations, how one goes representing themselves and the topic they're advocating for or even passionate about, and having the impact that they want to have, can have, if they're just willing to become maybe a little bit better than at what they're doing, and
that
to not
goes deep.
settle for what the company's willing to settle for.
That goes deeper. While the knowledge they have is important, it's not sufficient. My very first public speaking on the subject of quality was up in the Maryland, Virginia, DC area, and the National Society of Professional Engineers sponsored me to do a tutorial. And this is my very first time ever. And so I'm up on the podium and I look out, the room was filling because quality was a real hot topic. So we
Sure.
had federal agencies, state leadership, professional practice companies, and I froze. I had a silent prayer to God to make me die right now. They'd carry me off and worship me. But my Jesus, the last thing I want to do is talk. And as God saw me grab my notes to look at to refresh my memory, my eyeglasses fell off. And when I
Oh,
stood up, I realized I can't see beyond the first row. So I gave a great talk looking in the middle and upper tier of the attendees. And at the end, a couple of engineers came up and said, "Wow, where did you ever learn to present like that?"
no. Good deal. Congratulations. Yeah.
So, well, the point of the story is acknowledge the fear. It's real.
Yeah.
And you can get over it with Toastmasters, or like I did, leave your glasses home.
Yeah. I was in a debate club in high school, and the instructor that was in charge of mentoring the couple of us that were doing it, actually, there were two of us. I won't go where the other guy ended up. But anyway, that was one of the first things he said. First, get up, look at the middle and the back of the room, and scan. Never look at anybody, but they're going to think you are, and
That's good.
just keep scanning the room.
You're
And
right. It works.
now all you're doing is talking to a blur. You're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And then the other piece, of course, is as we've said, you've got to be genuine in what you're saying, and authentic and
Yes.
authoritative. That's why when I talk to my folks and people that I advocate for, it's one piece is become a subject area expert, which again is one piece, but you also have to understand how to be a servant leader. And I use that term. It's a term I've used now for several years, because a servant leader is an individual that understands who his audience is and is presenting to them, is helping them in a way that makes them better. You're already
Yes.
good enough. It's a matter of making them better. And
Yep.
that servant leader wants to see them succeed. And you do that from a point of authority. And at the end of the result, you become more impactful, and you ever maybe even get to move some of us dinosaurs off to the side and have real impactful change rather than just noise. Let's flip the script a little bit. We're going to run out of time here a little bit.
Sure.
Uh, we had talked a little bit about wanting to address construction site safety. And I want to focus in on that on a couple of various topics because at the end of the day, I believe that for an infrastructure professional to be really effective at their job, they need to have a real perspective of what the construction site is. For me, it was a matter of working as a construction manager for 2.5 years while I was an undergraduate, and seeing the realities of the differences between what's on a set of plans or in a set of specifications and what goes in, whether it be because of engineering error or the realities of dimensionality or tolerances, or just the fact you're building something that is so unique and at a scale of 150 feet in radius, so that nobody's ever built something like this before. There's just a lot of things you have to still do on the fly. And it's fun for me anyway. So the realities of construction versus the theory of construction in all regards. I wonder if you'd share some visions, some ideas, some perspectives on what you think people should be aware of as far as construction operations.
I think at the worker bee level and the manager level, I think there's no shortage of programs and information and at least verbal and written commitments to safety and construction. But I had a unique opportunity. I'd be happy to share the slide deck with you at another time,
Okay.
which, if you like to, you can make it public in one of your, if it's of interest to you and your audience. Is the University of Kansas had a safety conference, and Dr. Koo invited me to present. Now, I didn't know him, but he told me that someone recommended me. They probably had to fill a spot, and as you can see, I have no problem speaking about anything, whether I know about it or not. And so I did the research, and I couldn't believe it. So it's the no, it was August of 2023. Now I've got this slide deck put together. I could not believe what I learned: the horrific state of construction site safety. Now, to be clear, the current wisdom, if you can call it that, in the profession is prevention by design. And what I learned was doesn't work. Of course, there are some indication that to some degree that helps. But at the end of the day, what I learned was driving it was the construction end of the work not being collaborative from the C-suite of the construction company owners to the field superintendents. What was driving it was their bonus plan measured against completion dates of the constructed facility. And I can stop right there. Anyone with an imagination can take it the rest of the way. The number of factually, you'll see in a slide deck I'll send to you when we're done. Factually, the number of accidents that involved body parts as well as fatal accidents are horrendous. And when you look at the map of our country and the different insurance groups and agencies that oversee this, you talk about a mishmash of vegetable soup. There isn't an organized, solitary focus on it. There's a couple of excellent groups. There's some in Canada. There's one in Colorado. I'll send you information on that does research and conferences on the subject. But to me, while it's absolutely essential that preventing by design has value, it turns out that without prevention by collaboration across these boundaries, we're not going to see any significant change.
Completely agree. It's one thing to design something and design it with an eye towards constructability and safety. It's another thing to get into the construction environment and communication, effective communication about what's about to happen, why it's about to happen, and how to be safe while it happens is essential on the job site. And that is fluid. What the answer that you would get today may not be the answer you would get tomorrow on that same job site doing the same project, because things change. The environmental conditions, if nothing else, would be a dynamic factor. So we don't live in a static environment. You're not building it in a vacuum, if you could hold your breath that long.
A
And
takeaway quote was from a couple of iron workers up on a beam,
yeah,
one telling the other, uh, "We don't have time to get the belts and the hats. We got to get this done today."
wrong.
There was another one. There was a fatal failure in Connecticut. I'm fabricating the details, but it's pretty close. There was a hotel under construction. Let's say it was 20 or 25 stories high, and it was Friday afternoon, and they were getting bonuses. The people who did the concrete work, they were getting bonuses based on the number of concrete floors they set and then rise up to be put into the building.
Yeah,
And they were told there'd be an extra bonus if they got one more floor up. End of the story, 26 guys died.
yeah, yeah. And we've seen this. The bridge that collapsed in Florida was again a process of improper curing and design. We've seen other issues where the collapse in New Orleans. Again, it was a matter of getting hurry up and wait, hurry up and die. Uh, just the wrong environment to be there. And as you say, the motivation is the wrong motivation. Motivation should be about making sure everybody gets home at night, not how much money somebody might make at the end of the day
And still
for a
has
bonus.
all of their body parts.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually one of the construction projects I worked on, the contractor was getting a performance bonus if they could finish early based on the contract, and they succeeded. Finished about a week and a half early, and we had two major equipment failures, one of which almost cost me my life. And all I was doing was inspecting and monitoring and doing some construction management
Yeah.
and uh, and it was like, what's going on here? You're in such a rush that your equipment's failing because you're stressing it beyond its limits. Well, we got to get this done. Why? What's the rush? You got weeks to get this finished. No, we're trying to get this finished. We get big pay bonuses and all the rest. Yeah, totally true. Uh, with regard to personal safety, and we'll see where we end up there. Uh, it's one thing for us as professionals to visit a job site and be responsible for that job site. International Building Code says the engineer is or the design professional, whether it be our engineer, architect, whomever, is responsible for ensuring that the project is done the right way, even if you're not paid for it. As crazy as that is, but you're still responsible. But part of that is personal safety too. Getting it done right is safety. And so, beyond personal safety, it's also managing the safety of others. Any thoughts? How to do that effectively?
I think right now there's no shortage of information that addresses those issues. But I've become, because of what I learned in August of 23, not just my own words and slides, but what I learned from the other attendees and presenters and following up since that time. I think at the end of the day, what's driving it is not. For example, I just got news from a construction group in Australia, and about a concrete floor failing and the like, and how it took some lives and body parts and all. It seems that all of it comes back to a drive for profits on the construction end. And the cure for that would have to, I don't pretend to know enough to say here's the silver bullet cure for that. But I know enough to know that if we don't have a collaborative, cooperative group of people from planning, design, construction, operation, and maintenance, it's not going to get better.
So, as the AEC professional on the job site, it's your responsibility to create that collaborative environment so it does get better.
Well, I would say that while that may be the goal, the reality is that the construction owners who drive the construction superintendent or superintendents of the various phases, depending on the scale of construction, they end up ruling the day. I'm not going to argue that's right or wrong. That's simply the way it works. And
Yeah.
until something gets in the way of that, I'm not looking I'm gonna continue praying for the health and safety of not just the men and women in construction, but people who drive or walk by.
Yeah, well, my approach to that, Bill, would be to say that it's our responsibility as AEC professionals to get rid of those incentives to do fast and early and increase the incentives to do safe and quality. And if we flip the script where you get rewarded for finishing on time, but you get rewarded for having a limited number or no accidents. Let's just go no accidents. You have zero work hours lost, zero employees hurt, no body parts lost, no lives
Yeah.
lost. There should be a reward for that.
Yeah, there's no question that that's a goal worth pursuing.
Yeah.
But the minute you say
Well,
but,
we write the contracts. It's
well,
the contractor that's motivated to adhere to them. So it's our responsibility. We're culpable in this. We can do the change. And to sit back and we're waiting for somebody else to change it isn't the answer.
there would
We have to be the change agents to see that work environment is safe for everybody involved.
again, if we don't put ourselves up as a silo in charge of that, but if we facilitate open discussion and dialogue of the players that are involved, not just the engineers and so on, but the owners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, without that, it's not going to happen. And as you'll see in the slide deck I send you right now, across our country, we have no end of silos from each profession and commercial and industrial player in the game. And it is not coordinated. I understand, for example, the Colorado Safety Association, and that may not be the exact title. I'll send you what I have about them. They're continually looking to improve and research those outcomes to accomplish what you're suggesting, Dennis. I am not in the least bit against what you're suggesting, but what I'm saying is there has to be more systems thinking. It's not isolated parts of the system, it's the whole system.
Yep. And again, I'm here to advocate for individuals in a position to make change. And it's not going to be the people that like the way things are, which is the upper level management in many cases, not all. I'm not admonishing upper level management in a lot of cases because a lot of them do really great work, but we are where we are because of continuing to do the same thing. And we have to recognize that it's our responsibility to be part of the solution and not just noise talking about the problem. Bill, we're pretty
Yeah,
much out of time, and so
sure.
I want to give you just a couple of minutes. Any parting thoughts you want to share with the audience today?
The parting thought would be back in, I think you corrected me, it was 2000 or 2002 or three, we had the ASCE Committee on Women and Diversity
Yeah,
in Civil Engineering.
right.
And where we are today, women are so frustrated. We now have the Society of Women Engineers, the Society of Women in Construction, yada, yada, yada. It's time for the guys to grow up and understand the contributions that women offer to the profession. Yes, they approach it somewhat differently than men. Thank God they do. It's time to engage them and bridge across this mania of setting up gender-based societies and associations in our profession.
Yeah, we need to work together, not in silos, not as only one group can defend one group. We men are more responsible for advocating for women as women are advocating for women. I think of it a couple different ways. At the end of the day, as hard as women fought for the vote, you know how they got it? Men voted to give it to them. So you have to build alliances, you have to build allies. And I go back to, and this is what I learned from going back to our committee. Remember the workshop where they talked, in fact, the name of the workshop was White Men as Full Advocates for Diversity.
Yes.
And this is what we're talking about. We have to be part of the solution because by Jove, we are certainly part of the problem. And we've got to work with women to see that they succeed, that they're the best version. And by the way, as you may or may not know, It's not just engineering, it's all professions. It's the workplace that is built on a 1950s model, post-war model, where the idea was you went to work and that's all you had to worry about, and you were a commodity that came in, effectively a robot that came in and did your job and went home. And I don't care what, leave your home at home. Remember that term when we were growing up? You go to work, leave the burnt toast at the house,
Sure.
and come and do your work. Well, I'm sorry, that burnt toast is part of my life, and that burnt toast and that family is part of my life, and they come with me to work. And recognizing that and supporting that, recognizing that not everybody has the same work life environment, and support the diversity, whatever it may be, and make sure that women, minorities, underrepresented groups all have the opportunity to do what it is that they define as success and be successful at. Very good. I agree. I agree. Obviously, agree completely. It's again part of the reason why I invited you to come. I wish we could talk longer, but it is what it is. We're at the point now where people begin to doze off or turn off or whatever. So what we'll have to do is look for an opportunity to bring you back and continue the conversation, and maybe pivot a little bit more on some of these other issues that are so relevant and so important to the entry level and mid level professionals in the AEC environment. But with that said, Bill, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of the conversation and sharing your wisdom with all of us. I think the people that have tuned in and watched the podcast today, you're an important part of why we do this. I hope you found something in this conversation, if not the whole conversation, to be of value to you in your walk towards being a better version of yourself, to be more successful, to be more impactful, to achieve the goals you have, to establish and achieve the work-life balance that you deserve to have, not just aspire to have. And we're advocates for you. And with that, again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to my guest, Dr. Hayden. And until the next time.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Chad, for keeping me online.